Welcome to Wayfinder. I'm only partially joking. This is just what you'll spend most of your time doing in the game. Wayfinder, as it's truly called, is the upcoming free-to-play action multiplayer RPG from Airship Syndicate. Airship Syndicate are no slouches when it comes to their games either, typically. Studio has cut its teeth on a few prior titles that are all well received by the gaming audience. Battle Chasers, Darksiders Genesis, and most recently, the League of Legends story Ruined King. All of their games are rated very positively or above on Steam, which is no small feat to hit that triple. I can personally attest to their quality as well. All their former titles have been a blast to play. But unfortunately, there are a multitude more issues with Wayfinder than there are positives at this time, and it's not something that I can rightfully recommend and actually urge those interested to steer clear for the time being. So, let's dive into what Wayfinder does right, and unfortunately, where it takes all that momentum and shoots itself in the foot, and not only falls short, but actively moves backwards. Wayfinder, in my opinion, is definitely a pretty game. It's not going for an ultra-realistic appearance like, say, Call of Duty or the upcoming First Descendant, which is a similar game to Wayfinder. It's highly stylized, from the uniquely distinct playable characters called Wayfinders, the namesake of the title, the NPCs you interact with, such as merchants and quest givers, to the weapons you wield, to the skills effects that you deploy, to the enemies you are fighting, to the details of the environments in the limited open world, and the procedurally generated dungeons. I think it's all the better for that as well. It does show care and thought by the developer for the future of the title, which is important, as Airship Syndicate has launched and advertised Wayfinder as a live service game. Exactly as Warframe, in the shadow and on the coattails of the title from the publisher Digital Extremes. This will allow Wayfinder to remain looking stylish and good for years to come, as tech advances and those games that are attempting a realistic look fall to the wayside. This does also mean that the game should run on a broad range of devices. Currently, early access is available on PC via Steam and the PlayStation 5. Airship Syndicate did state that they do plan on releasing it on more platforms in the future, so I definitely look forward on the Xbox Series consoles as well as potentially the Nintendo Switch. These stylized visuals will help it bring it to varied PC setups and to lower-end console devices such as the Switch. The visual impressiveness does unfortunately end with the aesthetic, however. Cutscenes are only displayed as odd and off-putting slideshows of characters and enemies with voiceovers. The intro cinematic when you start the tutorial, as well as the introduction for each Wayfinder, called Memories, as well. These slideshows are accompanied by voiceovers of the characters involved and narrators if applicable. If you've played Redfall, do you remember how every cinematic moment that called for video, even movies you played in the movie theater, were just slideshows with a voiceover? Well, Wayfinder definitely went to that school presentation, and I believe it is the worst for it. Though there aren't many cutscenes, which does make me wonder why they went this route to begin with. Sure, a cutscene does take more resources to craft, but the extremely limited amount of cutscenes in the game just makes me think that these were nothing more than afterthoughts, which is incredibly disappointing. Ruined King had a mix of true cutscenes and the slideshows present in Wayfinder, but they were many times more numerous in quantity in that title. Not only that, but the true cinematic cutscenes in Ruined King were downright gorgeous, and Airship Syndicate did an absolutely phenomenal job with them. This is evidence that they do have the ability in them, they just did not apply it in this situation. Performance-wise, I've also had a few issues, which doesn't bode well for other PC users. My PC can't really be used to gauge as to what the average player will face either. I'm running a system with an RTX 4090 and an i9 13900K, and I'm subject to frame drops at random intervals, whether it be in combat or running around Skylight, the main hub city, or the Highlands, the open world zone, or even zones. This was present in the last beta, and it's still not fixed. I am also playing it in borderless windowed in 1080p, highest graphical settings in a highly stylized game, and it can't steadily maintain the 144 frames per second. The visual impressiveness does unfortunately end with the aesthetic, however. Cutscenes are only displayed as odd and off-putting slideshows of characters and enemies with voiceovers. The intro cinematic when you start the tutorial, as well as the introduction for each Wayfinder, called Memories, as well. These slideshows are accompanied by voiceovers of the characters involved and narrators if applicable. If you've played Redfall, do you remember how every cinematic moment that called for video, even movies you played in the movie theater, were just slideshows with a voiceover? Well, Wayfinder definitely went to that school presentation, and I believe it is the worst for it. Though there aren't many cutscenes, which does make me wonder why they went this route to begin with. Sure, a cutscene does take more resources to craft, but the extremely limited amount of cutscenes in the game just makes me think that these were nothing more than afterthoughts, which is incredibly disappointing. Ruined King had a mix of true cutscenes and the slideshows present in Wayfinder, but they were many times more numerous in quantity in that title. Not only that, but the true cinematic cutscenes in Ruined King were downright gorgeous, and Airship Syndicate did an absolutely phenomenal job with them. This is evidence that they do have the ability in them, they just did not apply it in this situation. Performance-wise, I've also had a few issues, which doesn't bode well for other PC users. My PC can't really be used to gauge as to what the average player will face either. I'm running a system with an RTX 4090 and an i9 13900K, and I'm subject to frame drops at random intervals, whether it be in combat or running around Skylight, the main hub city, or the Highlands, the open world zone, or even zones. This was present in the last beta, and it's still not fixed. I am also playing it in borderless windowed in 1080p, highest graphical settings, in a highly stylized game, and it can't steadily maintain the 144 frames per second. The sound design is a resounding overall. Voice actors did a good job delivering their lines for the slideshows or the visual novel style cutscenes that you do come across when you click through your quest dialogue with your character. Both the NPC characters are facing the screen, that sort of thing. The NPC voiceovers as you complete quest objectives are delivered fine from the hologram projecting dagger communication you have, your Gloom Dagger. Other than the voice acting though, everything is just very Various weapon attacks don't sound great. The music is serviceable but not great. Environmental sounds and effects aren't great. It's just very Weapon attacks though, it's just really bad. The melee attacks lack any real sound design when landing, and the guns are generic at best, which is a shame. These are large, oversized fantasy weapons, ranging from sword and board to giant axes and giant swords to scythes to magic-powered shotguns, rifles, and trace-like laser rifles. It seems like minimal effort was made outside of what sounds like generic hitmarker sounds for the firearms. The firearms all sound like an airsoft pellet hitting a stack of paper plates, while the melee weapons sound like someone rolled up a newspaper, soaked it through, and started beating a cabbage with it. Where the sound design in combat is good, however, is in the skills for the various different Wayfinders. Each Wayfinder has 4 skills in total, and they all do something different to help build an identity for them. They really did a good job giving each skill for each Wayfinder its own unique identity, sound-wise. And so if you're familiar with that character, if you're not looking, you could distinctly tell what the other player is doing based on the sound effects for their skills. The sound effects for the skills are done well, so good job with that, Airship. So, with the superficial items out of the way, let's dive into the game itself and how it plays and its systems. Or in the case of a vast majority of owners of this early access title, how it doesn't play for them. Wayfinder at its core is a multiplayer third-person action RPG. You choose one of 3 Wayfinders at the start of the tutorial, play with them a bit, then at the end decide if you want to switch or stick with who you chose. There are a total of 6 Wayfinders in the game, 2 of which you can unlock via normal crafting means, one of which is done through the rewards tower, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, so each Wayfinder will have 4 unique skills in their kit, which you can then level up 3 times each to apply different buffs to each skill, such as increased damage from the skill, projectile shot, healing's done, small things like that. The next major decision you'll make is what weapon you want to use. Kind of. Each Wayfinder will start with a specific weapon, the base Wayfinders. But other than that, you can use any of your unlocked weapons, and each Wayfinder will be better with a different type of weapon. such as Wingrave, who is focused on melee combat, will not be as good with a ranged rifle as he would with, say, a large two-handed sword or a sword and board. Weapons are not locked to specific Wayfinders and will also level up alongside you, increasing their base stats. Weapons do also have their own unique skill you build up and can use, from such as the scythe being able to buff your damage for a short period of time, or the rifle allowing you to shoot fully automatic with increased damage for a short period, rather than the 3-round burst it normally is. Aside from the Wayfinder and weapon choice, you do have the option to equip up to 3 accessories. Each accessory has a set level that it is dropped at or crafted at. Each will provide different stat boosts to your Wayfinder. On top of this, they also do come in sets, providing extra bonuses if you equip all items of the same set. Now the gearing continues. It doesn't stop there. Your Wayfinder, weapon, and accessories all have additional slots that you can then place echoes in. Echoes increase your stats like everything else. Each echo slot will have a matching type, so matching, say, a defensive echo to a defensive slot will increase its boost. Some echoes also provide a special effect you can activate by doing something such as a slam attack with your weapon or by dodging. As your Wayfinder and weapon levels up, the amount of open echo slots increases as well. Echoes themselves can be leveled up by fusing unwanted echoes into the one you do want. Be warned, however, based on the level of your Wayfinder, weapon, and the quality and level of your accessory, there's a certain max value of echoes you can have equipped on each item, so this is another thing you have to manage. There is then also the affinity system, which works for both your Wayfinder and each individual weapon, which this system boosts a specific set of stats each time you level that up for an increasing cost of materials. Outside of affinity, there is also weapon mastery, which you can level up between the 3 different overall choices over the 4 overall weapon categories. However, this does take a huge amount of XP, but it's based off, like I said, the weapon class rather than the weapon itself. Weapon mastery is a boost to all weapons of that type. For example, marksman weapons such as the shotguns and rifles, and what amount to trace rifles from Destiny 2. You then have two-handed weapons, sword and board, and then the agile dual daggers. More most likely will be added as the game moves on and goes. These weapons will be added to these categories. Aside from this, there are then just some potions you can also craft that do increase the damage or your defense, as well as the always present healing potion. Like I said earlier, you start off with 1 Wayfinder of the 5, 6 if you count the rewards tower 1, as well as 1 weapon of a possible 14, or there's also 3 other weapons you can purchase for in-game gold at Arsenal, the weapon dealer. For the other 10, that's a different story. So let's talk about what you will be doing with most of your time in this game, aside from waiting at a queue screen. And that is grinding for materials. Every weapon, every accessory, every potion you can craft, every new Wayfinder, every skill requires a lot of resources to unlock or level up. And they do require a lot of overlapping resources as well. Naturally, to get those, you're going to be grinding content a lot. But what is there to do? Well, a few things. First off, there's an open world area called the Highlands. It's a medium-sized and instanced, so you will see other players running around occasionally. There are various monsters and wildlife throughout, crafting materials you can gather, small events to participate in, some world boss type enemies to fight. There are a few quests you will do that take place out in the zone, but the activities are rather sparse and it feels like it's just a checkbox on a list to have completed for a game. This is also where you'll discover the different zones which you'll be spending most of your time in Wayfinder in. Zones are the dungeons of the game, and this is where you'll get most of your game time. You will be running these a lot. Some quests require you to complete objectives that sometimes occur only once in a zone. Sometimes they won't occur at all in that run. And that is because zones are procedurally generated from a tile set. So while each run through a specific zone will be familiar, it won't typically be exactly the same as the last few you've done. On top of the zones being procedurally generated, there are a few options then to further change them up even more. Zones have different difficulties called spheres, The higher the sphere, the higher the recommended power level there is. You can then also select from 5 different imbuements to change the zone even more. From, say, the floor imbuement, which adds toxic plants to the dungeon that you need to destroy to give yourself some breathing room to fight, to chaos, which adds a trickster who likes to drop bombs on everyone occasionally and booby trap chests. Eventually, you will be able to apply 2 imbuements, which then add new mechanics overall, as well as including the other ones. One major issue I do have with the zones, however, is how queuing for them works. It's terrible. Once you discover them in the Highlands, you can then queue up for them in Skylight. You will have access to all the discovered ones from a large portal present in the hub city, which you will need to do. Your main quests and side quests will send you to specific zones, and those zones have power level requirements. This means that you'll need to grind. For this, you'll need to manually go through every dungeon and figure out which one you need to do, which one you're appropriately leveled for, which one's, it's going to have the best gains for you. Just a simple queue for random zone would suffice. Queue for a zone of X to X power level would suffice. Seeing how many people are actually queuing for a specific zone would suffice. Instead, at times, you will be waiting minutes in a queue, then to only load into a zone all by your lonesome. This is a terrible thing to experience in a game that is being advertised and touted as a multiplayer game. The combat, however, is simple yet fun. You are limited to 4 skills per Wayfinder and 1 weapon skill on top of that. But how they interact with one another and with other Wayfinder skills is fun to experiment with on the fly. The combat loop is fun, from the simple mechanics of the mobs and enemies to the larger boss encounters, which feel like an actual true boss encounter with ever-increasing mechanics to participate in. There's also specific zones you can play to fight a boss, and that's what you can choose instead to do if you want. Depending upon your completion amount of each zone, or how little you and your party die, you can earn up to 3 bonus chests for each run, granting all important crafting materials. Then again, some materials you earn aren't even in the game yet, so that is a huge detriment and strike against Wayfinder. Rewards for playing the game aren't even usable yet. Kind of a slap in the face and a waste of time. Speaking of rewards, and rewards you can't use, now's the best time to get into the monetization of the game. And oh boy, it's all here. Naturally, as a live service game, and even non-live service games anymore, or I guess non-free-to-play games, like Call of Duty, Diablo, many other paid games have battle passes now. This game has one as well. However, Wayfinder calls it the Reward Tower, and it's a little atypical. Unlike the standard season or battle pass, where you just progress in a straight line through, it's divided up into what are called floors, and each floor will have a few paths you can take or skip to get which rewards you want. Think of how Call of Duty does theirs now. You can take the paths and nodes you want to get to the next floor, just to skip everything on a certain floor and hunt out, say, specific items, make it all the way to the end, and then go back and fill in, wherever you would like to at the end. So, a lot of options. Like I said, you can beeline for what you want. Towards the end of the season, go back and gather what you initially skipped, so if you so choose, if that's how you want to do it. Now, let's get to the really gross part. The hard monetization of Wayfinder. I'll just start off by saying that I myself am an idiot. Wayfinder is in early access. It is in paid early access. A future free-to-play game is an early access if you pay for it. There are various Founders Packs as well, ranging from the base price of $19.99 that just grants you access to the game as well as a title. That's a system that's not even in the game yet either. And all the way up to $149.99 for the Awoken. That's right, $149.99 to play a free-to-play game that's in a terrible state. You are paying $150 to, at this point, what amounts to alpha testing the game with how it's running. Outside of these Founders Packs, the usual suspects are here. You've seen them in many games. Cosmetics for characters to change their outfits, as well as dyes to customize them a little bit further. Cosmetics to change the appearance of various weapons, and even charms. You can attach your weapons for a little bit more flair. Wayfinder even has some player housing systems, so, furniture can appear at times. There are all sorts of things I can understand as being part of a free-to-play live service game. Cosmetics to let people who enjoy the game and want to give back to it monetarily outside the rewards tower. However, the following I can't condone at all. The long grind for materials to unlock new wayfinders and weapons I spoke of earlier? Well, with just a swipe of your credit or debits, or the numerous other ways Steam and the PSN allow you to pay via their platforms, you can just skip all of that. Wayfinders can be bought, but not directly, of course. That'd be too easy. You can purchase Wayfinders with Rune Silver, the game's premium currency, which you buy in bundles because, of course. The original 3 Wayfinders, that being Silo, Nis, and Wingrave, all cost 1,500 Rune Silver, one of which you have unlocked after the tutorial. Newer additions since the last beta period, Senja and Kairos, each cost 1,900 Rune Silver. It's safe to say that new characters will cost more as they come out. Maybe older ones will get shuffled back in price, but who knows. Then, of course, there are the weapons you can purchase. You can skip the grind for them as well. The entire point of the game. Purchase the weapons with Rune Silver. Weapons range in price from 750 to 1,150 Rune Silver. The newest editions post-beta costing more. You gotta get those whales good. Now, this costing 1150 sparked a lot of controversy. So much so, in fact, that Airship Syndicate already had to apologize for this and is promising to change the pricing. It was pointed out that at 1,150, purchasing the $9.99 bundle of Rune Silver will give you a 100 Rune Silver bonus, which is, nothing more than psychologically manipulating you to think that you're getting a deal, isn't actually enough for these weapons. You are 50 Rune Silver short at 1,100. So, you then need to purchase the next bundle at $19.99 with that bonus of 300 Rune Silver to get 2,300 Rune Silver. Because purchasing that lowest amount at $4.99 just isn't a good deal for 500 extra. Airship did acknowledge this outcry from the community, and rightfully so. They pledged to lower the price to 1,000 Rune Silver, refund that extra 150 pieces to people's accounts if they had already purchased the items. However, there still has been no update to the UI in-game. The weapons still display a price of 1,150. And now I need to stand on a soapbox a little bit. This entire thing is a major issue for me with the game and with games in general. Yes, it's a PvE game with no PvP, but this is still selling power. I am not against the game, especially a free-to-play title, having monetization. The developer deserves to make money. I can't argue with that. Wayfinder outfits are the prime place for this. Cosmetics. Craft cool and unique outfits of varying price ranges from low and simple to high and complex. More dyes, more complex dyes, weapon skins and charms, and even implement weapon dyes. More options for players cosmetically who want to support you, and for their player housing. Rather than just, a doorway to your house, create a zone that's instant with, other players in your version of skylights. So many ways to go about this instead of selling power. People who love your game will purchase cosmetic items in it to help support you. Pay for power. Come on. This is just some sort of South Korea or Chinese mobile game gadget bullshit. Instead of a catalog of outfits and cosmetics, your shop operates purely on FOMO, with the items just rotating out for who knows how long. Your characters and weapons are priced to have you purchase extra currency, but then not have enough left over for another transaction, and thus purchase more. Just go well and above and beyond what and just purchase a much larger currency pack to begin with. All this pay for power, and yes, pay for convenience is pay for power. On top of access to early access requiring a purchase, and like I said earlier, I am also an idiot for buying into this. But I had hopes for the title, and that's what I get. This is what I deserve. And this cash ship's not even the worst of it. Wayfinder was initially set to enter early access on August 15th, but some issues postponed this until the 17th. So, early access cannot be purchased in advance due to how Steam and the PSN function, so the developers and publishers had no idea the actual number of players looking to play the game, and boy oh boy, were they absolutely ill-prepared. Immediately, the queue system for Wayfinder failed. Some people attempting to log into the game didn't have a queue, nor know they were in a queue, so they just kept spamming the login button, breaking the servers even more. Server capacity was not up to snuff, to say the least, and the first action Airship Syndicate did to rectify this was to greatly decrease the concurrent player count. By greatly, I mean we were sub 10,000 players. Slowly, over the next few days, changes were made. The queue was fixed, then it wasn't, it broke, then it was, but then it broke, but then it was, kind of. You can see your position in the queue, but there is no estimated time. That forever remains 0. Hours spent waiting in the queue just for the server to crash, but not for everyone, only to be sent to the back of the queue once more. If you were in the game and the server crashed, you also got sent to the back of the queue. There's no reconnect system for people who were disconnected at the fault of Airship Syndicate and Digital Extremes. Your 3 hours wait to play the early access you paid for to clearly test at this point for 10 minutes turned into another 3-hour time in queue hell. Recording content for this review, the game crashed mid-dungeon and I was forced to close the game down and re-queue. I wish I was exaggerating, this was perhaps the worst launch of an online title I have ever been a part of. And I know something about terrible online game launches. I've played WoW since 2004 and every expansion breaks their servers. I've played Final Fantasy XIV for every expansion since its woefully terrible 1.0 2010 version. New World, another busy launch. Just, the launch of Wayfinder was abysmal and is still abysmal. The concurrent player count still can't support everybody trying to log in, and you're constantly in at minimum 10,000 player queues. To top it off, refunds are not available for this game for most people, at least not on Steam. I'm unsure of how the PlayStation Network refund system works, but I'm sure it's the same for them as well. With how the game is packaged, only the base pack for early access is refundable through the normal means. The Initiate, Exalted, and Awoken packs are considered currency packs on Steam and technically do not qualify for a refund. So if you spent more to support Airship Syndicate than the base pack, well, you sure got fooled on this one. It's not even a single purchase either. Every single pack, for some reason, is purchased separately, one on top of the another. So if you purchase the Awoken pack, each pack below and the base Founders pack are all purchased separately. It's whack, and it's needlessly complicated. Look, I know this game is stated as being an early access, but to me, it has lost every single right to be judged as a title in early access. Half-baked features are present in it. There are rewards and items rewarded to the player which have zero functionality, yet they are just stated as being available soon, but are on the back end of the provided roadmap from the developers. There is a full cash shop present, where predatory practices are used to extract more and more money from the player base who already paid to test the game, and then are asked to pay in even more quantities of currency, that make no sense except to extract more and more from purchases and transactions. Pay for power is present in this cash shop. Early access required a purchase for a game that is intended as being free to play across all platforms eventually, yet access to the title is little to none. Hour waits and half-functioning queues terminated by server issue upon server issue, restarting your wait after having to restart the game. Random disconnects while traveling from location to location via loading screen, forcing you then to close the game and re-queue. Random server crashes while in dungeons or in the open world or in the city, forcing you to close your game and re-queue. I mean, over the last 6 days, queue times have gone down by about an hour, but overall, it's still an hour to 2 hours, and this is a title that should have not launched as it did. I really wanted to like Wayfinder. Its visual style and its presentation outside of the cutscenes is phenomenal. I love it. The combat is simple but fluid and fun. The repeatability of the dungeons helps alleviate the inevitable grind you will face as you work to level up your Wayfinder and weapons, as well as unlock new Wayfinders and weapons. If you, of course, don't cave and spend cash on them. The whole pay for power thing that is present. Severe launch woes. Predatory microtransaction practices. Iffy performance. Abysmal server stability. And multiple hour-long queues that you will wait in multiple times per play session if you have that patience. Make this a hard pass. From me, as my advice to you. Perhaps, hopefully in the near future, some of these issues will be ironed out. The cash shop won't, that much I can be certain of. That pay for power is here forever. But getting the game to a playable state might be obtainable by Airship, Syndicate, and Digital Extreme sometime in the future. Honestly, though, I'd say just wait until it leaves early access and is truly a free title. If early access enters a free state, there's no harm giving it a try there as well. Thanks for tuning in. I need a palate cleanser.